We're on kind of a tight schedule, and we are going to have to conclude this meeting no later than 11 o'clock. So welcome to everybody that came today. Welcome to those that are watching on the live streaming. And again, let me remind everybody, particularly trustees, to be sure to turn on your mics before we speak, because we need to get that on the record, and it won't pick up unless we are on that. And also, again, we need to conclude this meeting by 11. It was kind of called with a short notice thing. I know some people have some other commitments, so let's try and operate as efficiently and to the point as we can. Having said that, Rebecca, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? And following that, Dave, will you give us our safety minute?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, we start with our safety poster. Don't put your safety on hold just because it's cold. There's lots of opportunities to make sure your snow shovels and your ice and your blankets are in your car. But again, we say just leave your car at home, leave the driving to us. Second item I want to tell you about, again, is just a coordination. Chief Ross is here with us, and he does a great job coordinating with the other agencies along the corridor. But last Monday, when the president was in town, we actually had an officer that rode in the motorcade with the president to make sure that our system was not impacted. And so we had no delays on the system as they crossed both the light rail and the front runner tracks during that long motorcade. So it was a good effort on our police part to be part of it. And one thing that is in your GM report, but Jerry's allowing me to mention it to you, part of the new state safety oversight requirement with the FAST Act is that the state becomes safety certified by the Federal Transit Administration. This is a requirement for us to maintain our federal funding, which is a $79 million annual amount that comes from the FTA. And so that was in jeopardy. We had to get it by next year or in next year. And I want to just read the letter that we received, or UDOT, who is the state safety oversight, received. It was this letter to Governor Herbert. Is to inform you that Utah's State Safety Oversight Program has been approved and certified by the FTA in accordance with the requirements of the FAST Act. Certification is an important achievement and promotes the safety of our nation's rail transit system. Utah's diligence in fulfilling these requirements and devoting necessary resources will make public transportation safer for the passengers who ride Utah's rail transit system. I want to let you know that of the 31 states who have a state safety oversight program, Utah was only the third state to become state safety certified. So that has been accomplished. We can now move forward and continue to do great things at UTA. Thank you, sir.
Great news. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Rebecca. Let me note at this point, there may be some trustees that are on the way to this meeting and they get here, and Trustee Karen Cronin is participating by telephone. We have two items for consent that were included in the board packets. If there aren't any questions or concerns with those two items, I would entertain a motion to approve those consent items. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Are there any abstentions or opposition votes? Seeing none, that carries unanimously. Thank you. I'll now turn some time over to our CEO, Jerry Benson, for this month's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have in your materials this month's President CEO report, and there are a couple items I'd like to highlight out of this month's report. First relates to our service in Utah County, and we have an update in the report on the Provo-Orem BRT project. But we were overshadowed last week by another announcement, which is a significant milestone for us and for BYU and UVU universities and the communities in Utah County, and with those two universities about where they want to go and what their vision for their campus and their student life is. And we're really very gratified to have both universities make a long-term commitment to provide transit passes at no cost to their students, faculty, staff, and dependents. And this will begin next August 2018 in conjunction with our early opening of that line. So we had the opportunity to do a little press event last Thursday with President Worthen and President Holland from the two universities, and it's an exciting time. So things are moving forward on the project, and we have a lot of work to do to be open for that August timeframe, but we're confident we'll be able to meet it. I'd like to comment a little bit about UTA's role in President Trump's visit on December 4th. We were contacted just the Friday before that to see if we could provide transit shuttle service for people attending the event. So with just a couple of days' notice, we were able to get a number of bus operators background checked and cleared by the Secret Service in time to start providing that. I want to recognize especially our downtown supervisor, Ron Halton, who coordinated all of this, and the operators who made that service happen. We transported 754 passengers from the fairgrounds to the Capitol and back. I'd like to talk about UTA's participation in a cutting-edge connected vehicle, smart vehicle technology program in conjunction with UDOT, and we're really happy to receive a recognition at the 2017 annual conference that UDOT has for our participation on the innovation team. You've heard me talk about this before, but this is the first in what I believe will be a long-term integration of our technology and our information systems with UDOT's technology. Because of the investments we've made in the past in our smart bus technology, we already have all kinds of information about what route it's on, who the driver is, whether it's on time, early or late, how many passengers are on board. And now we're able to communicate that information to the UDOT signal system, and they can use that to prioritize high-capacity vehicles, and especially if our buses are running late, let them flow through the signals. And this is happening right now on Redwood Road. We hope to have this technology advance to the level we can incorporate it even on the BRT project in Provo Norm when that opens. So nice to get a little thank you from UDOT for our help in that project. The last thing I just want to call attention to is the Governor Herbert's declaration of November as the Alternative Fuel Vehicle Awareness Month, and I was asked to speak at an event sponsored by the Clean Cities Coalition about UTA's role in smart alternative fuel clean vehicles. UTA, going back to 2005, was certified to the ISO 14001 environmental standard. We are a founding member of the Climate Registry and a charter signatory to the International Transit Sustainability Charter. And vehicle emissions is one of the areas that we focused on the most. And it was great to be included with that group, not just for our investment in compressed natural gas vehicles, but for our overall investment in making sure that our fleet and our operations are as clean as they can be. And if there aren't any questions about the rest of the report, that concludes my remarks.
Thank you. Any questions from the board on the report? Yeah, Greg.
I did talk to one member of the advance team who was really grateful for UTA's role in getting, I think, 6 drivers like that, and the background checks are almost impossible to do in a short time. And I guess the Secret Service decided that really the only way to bring people to the Capitol, keep it secure, was through UTA, but it was very, very late in the process. And so UTA jumped on it, got 6 drivers cleared in a matter of 24 hours or something, and he just couldn't say enough.
Thank you, Jerry. There's a lot of really positive stuff going on, so it's always good to hear that kind of thing. We'll now open the floor for the general public comment, which is not specific to an agenda item. Bob, do we have any cards that have been filled out?
I do not have any filled out cards.
All right, is there anybody that wants to make a general comment that did not fill out a card? If not, I will close the public comment period and we'll proceed with the committee updates since our last meeting, and let's begin with an update. No, we won't, because Jeff's not here, is he? You know, I think what I'll do then is I'll turn it over to Jerry and to Bob to present our 2018 budget proposal. I would ask the trustees at this time too that hold off any questions, because following the reports we'll have our public comment period, and then let's have any board questions that we need to at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the final stage in our budget process that began in October with the Finance Committee review of a tentative budget. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of work that goes into this across the whole organization, but the finance team led by Bob Biles really are the heroes in this process. We made a number of changes in how we approached our budget this year, and I think as part of our culture of continuous improvement, we found some things that worked better, that are able to create more value for the taxpayers, and we'll incorporate those into our process going forward into the future years. Are you going to run the slides? So I'm going to go very, very quickly through the first several slides because you've seen these a couple of times before. We tried to focus our priorities around the key initiatives that were identified by you all in your summer retreat. You directed us to focus on improving our customer experience, improving service, building community partnerships, demonstrating stewardship of our resources, having a long-term vision, and then making sure that our employees are also ready for the future. So we have incorporated in this budget a number of initiatives and investments that will address those priorities. And I'm just going to go pause for just a few seconds on each of these slides to remind you what we've talked about before in the area of customer experience, service. We do have improvements in service primarily in the bus area this year. The early opening of the BRT is a major milestone for service. Our partnerships are what make everything happen for us. Everything we do in partnership. And so this PASS program that the Brigham Young and Utah Valley announced last week is a great demonstration of that. Stewardship is taking care of what we have while we also think about the future, and there are significant investments in state of good repair and vehicle replacement included in our 2018 budget. As part of our long-term vision, if this budget's approved, we'll be standing up a new office called Innovative Mobility Solutions. It'll be a small group of people, and we've been able to repurpose or capture headcount from within the organization. So we're not adding a big new line item, we're repurposing resources within the organization. But this will allow us to have a group of people who are really focused on incorporating the advances in technology and the major disruptive trends in transportation to make sure that we're staying on top of things and planning for the future, but also advancing technology more quickly. So by piloting new technologies and partnering with UDOT and the universities and others, we can see what technologies really work and what are not quite ready for prime time. We're primarily a service agency, and so our employees are at the core of what we do day in and day out. We know that attracting and retaining highly qualified professional employees is key to our success. And in today's tight labor market, we need to be more creative in how we attract people. So I'm excited to be including our maintenance mentor program in this budget for 2018 that will allow us to go into high schools to start recruiting people and getting them interested in careers in transit, especially in skilled crafts. So we asked for public input, and the period of time between the October Finance Committee and now is really all about making sure everyone who has an interest in our operations and our budget has an opportunity to review and comment on where we're investing our resources. We had a number of themes in the public input that we received. One theme and the, I guess, loudest voice around our budget is find ways to add more service, find ways to improve and increase service. So since the tentative budget that you've seen before, one of the changes that I've made is to include a $500,000 addition in service, which would be offset by $500,000 of revenue. And this is a placeholder. It gives us the opportunity to go meet with and work with some of our stakeholders like cities. Salt Lake City has just released their transit master plan. They've expressed an interest, and some of the feedback we got on the budget was an interest in working with us to have city-funded service improvements so that they don't have to wait for the growth in sales tax over the long term. We already partner with a number of entities such as Summit County and Park City for the Park City service, the ski resorts for our ski service, and Salt Lake County recently set aside $4.5 million to make improvements in the Sugar House streetcar. So this is not a new thing for us, and I don't know exactly what's going to go into that and whether that will be the right number, but it's a direction from you to me and the rest of the staff to go make these things happen. We received feedback about fare enforcement, and I'm happy to say that one of the issues that was a challenge before was being fully staffed in our public safety and fare enforcement area. And we've made great strides already now before the end of this year to make sure those functions are fully staffed and we're able to achieve our targets for the percentage of riders whose fares are inspected. We had a number of suggestions about changes and simplification to our fare structure, and we'll be continuing to take public input about that throughout the year. The improvements that are included in our plan for this year focus right now on our UTA Go Ride app and adding some of the fare options to that convenient, easy to use fare medium using smartphones. And then lastly, we had some comments about managing our debt from the voter-approved investments in the Frontlines 2015 program. And we're going to talk about some of that a little bit later on our advanced refunding and bond issue. So to summarize the changes that are in this final budget compared to the tentative budget that you've seen before, we have an increase in revenue and expenses of $500,000. There are a couple other things, and unless there are questions, I won't go into the rest of the details, but there were a few positions that had not been accounted for. It was headcount we had and had been approved, but it was not included in the tentative budget, and then a little bit of moving positions between capital and operating. So if you go to the capital slide, the things I want to highlight here are changes in our capital projects. So as projects move along, as we get firm quotes from suppliers, we have better numbers. So we have some good news and bad news there. The good news is our buses are going to be a little cheaper than we had budgeted, but a couple of our other capital projects are going to cost us a little bit more. So we have an increase of $400,000 for positive train control and $200,000 for our electric bus implementation project. Yes.
The increases on those projects, like positive train control and the implementation of the electric bus, what aspect is that? Is that in the hardware? Is that labor? Is it what's driving those increases?
So I'm going to see if somebody can help me with that answer. I know that on the electric bus, that the biggest part of that project is the vehicles. So that's likely a vehicle increase. And I don't know, Todd, if you have any light to shed on the positive train control project. So I'll follow up with you, Trustee Milburn. I'm sorry, I don't have the detail on that. The positive train control is one where a lot of, you make good estimates, but when you get in and actually do the work, you find that you either need a different configuration or it's more complicated than you thought. I'll follow up and get you the details on both of those. So in summary, we listened to a significant amount of public feedback. We received letters and calls and emails and feedback on our website from the public, from elected officials, and we've made modifications in the budget to respond to that. We've worked to align our priorities with the priorities you identified last summer. We're continuing to work on building partnerships, and partnerships is a way that we can extend the reach and impact of the resources we have by partnering with others. And then we're taking a forward view with our innovative mobility solutions to make sure that we incorporate the trends and changes in technology in a way that makes a positive difference for people and for communities. So if there are other questions, I'd be happy to entertain them now. Great.
Thank you, Jerry. Let's now proceed to open the floor for public comment on this proposal. We've had public comments throughout October and November in public hearings. We've solicited comments from our municipal partners as well as the general public, and any of those comments are received in your packet. Bob, do we have people that want to comment on this today?
I don't have any completed cards.
Does anybody in the audience want to comment on the budget? If not, we'll close the public comment period and turn the time over to the trustees for questions or comments on the budget. Are there any? Mayor Taylor.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just make a few brief comments and I'll summarize. I know we're time sensitive today. I just have some of the same concern I'd expressed last month and am not in favor of this budget and just wanted to share a few reasons why. One thing.
Let me interrupt you for a minute. Do you intend to offer a motion to delete anything out of the budget, or are you just making comments?
No, Chairman, I didn't plan on making a motion. So if you want a motion first, I can hold my comments till after there's a motion.
I was just curious as to whether there was something in particular you wanted to remove out of the budget. Or if not, that's fine. I just was curious. Go ahead.
So comments I have are just, about the overall nature of the budget and the new bonding, which I know is not this topic, but I kind of look at it tied together. I mentioned last month, some calculations I'd done during the meeting, and then I spent some more time this month to compare the budgets from 5 years ago. I thought that was a good kind of baseline budget to look at. In 2013, our total expenditures compared to the 2018 budgets, and $98 million in higher expenses in this new budget than years ago. And that's largely because we have higher tax revenues from sales taxes and Proposition 1. But I look at it, so we're spending $98 million more in the current budget, which is an increase of almost a third. And the passenger revenues, however, which I think is the most important factor on the revenue side to show us the health of the agency, is only about just under $400,000 higher than 5 years ago in 2013, which is less than 1%. So I'm concerned when for every dollar in new passenger revenues we're seeing over a period of 5 years, the expenditures is over $270 more for each of those dollars. That's a very disproportionate number, and a concern to me that we're spending so much more, and this doesn't even include capital. This is just in the operating budget, almost $100 million more annually to have no growth in passenger revenues, or essentially no growth, under $400,000 total dollars. So I just don't feel that that is a sustainable model, and I wonder we've spent in these 5 years that I've talked about that the budget has increased each year significantly, hundreds of millions of total dollars in new money, and not really produced any new riders. And I think that's a big concern to me, especially when at the same time we're issuing new debt. So our revenues have gone up, we're spending way more, but we haven't used that for the items that we're going into more debt for. $88 million in new debt. Why haven't we been using, this higher revenues? If it's not going, we're not carrying more passengers. So I would rather have seen us put that to these items that need new debt, or to retire existing debt, instead of into more operations that simply are not producing more people on the train. The other thing I'll mention is the budget process. I'm brand new here as of a year ago, first budget process I've seen, and I just can only compare it to the budget process I've seen in, for example, the city. I'm the mayor of a small city. We putting together our city budget. We have 2 all-day budget retreats with our city council and staff. We've had nearly a dozen different meetings. We worked on our budget for 6 months, and this is a small city for a $16 million budget. And I look at this board has discussed this budget twice, briefly, very briefly, both times, less than an hour. And I know there was a finance committee that discussed it twice as well, but roughly the same period of time looking at those minutes. And this is with the capital $550 million budget. And I struggle to see, I looked through the changes that were sent out from Bob and that Jerry just mentioned. I couldn't find a single item in the budget that changed from the initial budget to the final budget based on something that was said by the board members. And so I personally wish we spent more time on it. I wish the board was involved more in the details, and I think it would produce a better budget in the long run. So in summary, I feel like, to kind of compare this to a family, our income's gone up a lot in the last 5 years from tax income. The passenger income hasn't gone up, but our tax income has gone up a lot. And instead of using that for capital projects and things, we've used that on operations, and now we're needing to bond at a time when our income has risen dramatically. And I just don't think that's fiscally the responsible choice. So I'm opposed to the budget and to the new bonding. Thank you.
All right. I would like to comment that the Finance Committee and other members of this board have spent hours looking at this budget, so it isn't anything that was just put together by staff and the board not having reviewed it. Are there any other comments by the board? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve this budget.
Maybe just a quick comment.
The answer is yes.
Well, as I have my finger on the button, I guess I should. Maybe some thoughts that occur based upon Trustee Taylor's comments. This is a huge budget, and it's much different than larger scale and scope and all aspects from a city or even my county budget. And I know what Trustee Taylor's talking about is about the time spent. I know, look at the time that we spend on our county budget. A little bit different role and perspective, but I do, I guess I would agree with Trustee Taylor that maybe there's an opportunity for this board to maybe spend a day or two in a very in-depth opportunity to review and understand how the budget is put together, and maybe sit with the different divisions or whatever, and if there's presentations that are made or things of that nature to fully understand, I know I'd welcome that. That being said, it's we could spend as a board hours and days and weeks doing this, and it's finding that balance between being fiduciary in our responsibilities and micromanaging. So it's kind of a tough challenge there, but and I also think we need to take into consideration, and sometimes it's not just as easy as dollars in or increases here and match that to outcomes, particularly measurements of ridership. There are a lot of other things that come into play that during my tenure and what I've seen, there's a lot of outside factors that come into play when we're measuring ridership, and that could be how the economy is doing, the price of fuel, things of that nature. The cheaper the gas is, the more inclined people are to drive rather than to ride the system. So just some general comments to Trustee Taylor's remarks. I think there's some things that we ought to take into consideration and implement, but also at the same time, a lot of other circumstances to consider also. Thank you.
If there are no more comments, I would entertain a motion
Mr.
with
Chair.
respect to the budget.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Jerry, I would appreciate your comment on ridership. This has been a concern. And if we're in a plateau and a progression, that's one thing. But if indeed, we have taken flack for flat ridership, I just wonder what the projections are in that regard. I mean, we invest. Certainly, you have to do some repair and maintenance, but building new facilities like we are in BRT, what are the projections and what can we expect? Because the point's been well made.
So the period of time that Trustee Taylor chose to use for his analysis is the period of time from 2013 to the present. It's the time after the completion of the 2015 capital construction program till today. It's after the ending of the Great Recession till today. And so if we look at the 5 years before that, we had dramatic increases in ridership from 2008 to 2013. And that was driven in part by opening and completing the rail projects that were part of that program. We also know that during that time, we were reconfiguring our system. And so, for example, when FrontRunner was put into service, all of those express bus routes that were in place before were replaced with FrontRunner. And the net was we went from carrying about 4,000 people a day on our express bus to 7,000 a day during the first year of FrontRunner. Now we're up to probably 9,000 or 10,000 a day for that leg of the service. So we had very strong growth in the 5 years before this period of time. But I will say that we're at a point right now where we need to make sure that the whole system is optimally designed. And there have been a number of, moving targets with Prop 1 and others where we weren't sure exactly what our revenue was going to be. And so it's hard to design a system around that. What I can say is that we're at a place now where this coming year we'll be able to develop 5-year service plans for every sector in our service region and be able to really put together the optimal local bus, a core network of high-frequency bus, the rail system, and then our ancillary services. And we'll be able to use some of our more innovative approaches, such as dial ride and voucher and those kinds of things, to fill out in areas where we're the least efficient with a regular 40-foot route bus. So I acknowledge that the last few years we've seen ridership be pretty steady, and we know there are external factors that affect that, such as gas prices and vehicle ownership. But I am confident that transit is still an important part of how people get around and a really important part of how communities develop. And getting through with our construction program and now optimizing how the whole system works together in partnership with UDOT is where we are. So I'm confident we'll be back on steady ridership growth, and in those areas where we're able to add service, we'll see strong ridership growth. This year, FrontRunner, Sugar House Streetcar, and our coordinated mobility services are all up. And it shows that where you're able to provide customers a good value that's affordable, they're smart. People are smart. They're going to make good choices.
Because the public does keep track of our progress and rate us, I think, on ridership, I think that'd be well if we could have reports to the board on that. And also in the subcategories. My perception is that TRAX is just very, very successful. It's growing. As you think about the University of Utah, they're going to rebuild their medical school, their school of physical therapy. They're going to put something like an 11-story surgical center, with other uses. And then Huntsman has ambitious expansion plans. They're always bringing hundreds, millions of dollars in projects up there. So TRAX seems to me to be great. The airport line, when did that actually open?
It was 2008.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of the front rail line to the north is 2012.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we're only going to see increases there, especially when the new facility's done. I do feel, at least I have the perception, that our bus service is lagging and that we may have topped out. And I think that's what you're talking about when you talk about reconfiguring so that we have a comprehensive system so we can have transfers and serve people who really need it. We're bringing BRT on in Utah County. But I really do think we ought to at least acquaint the board. Maybe staff is doing all this, but I think you really ought to acquaint the board, and we ought to spend some real time on bus service. And I'm talking particularly in West Valley City, places where people don't have easy access, to tracks and to front runners. So just our feeder buses, non-express. And then I think we have to realize that gas at $2.40, $2.50 is just, we're not at the break point. We saw when gas was in the $3, we saw a flight to mass transit. And so, people just will absorb a certain price, but there's that break point. And then finally, I just, while this is concerning, long term, when you think about the growth of this valley, and we're going to have 2.5 million more people in the next 25 years, we have to get ahead of that. We have to build it. When the legislature and others finally decide what they're going to do at Point of the Mountain, that's going to set up like concrete. That's going to be all of a sudden a lot of activity from nothing, just planning, and then all of a sudden things are going to pop, and Harriman, Bluffdale, Lehigh, Draper are going to say, hey, where are your systems? The Adobe, the editorial from the manager of Adobe saying you got to bring tracks around the mountain, or I'm not going to be able to attract developers and bright young people. So there is a pioneering element in this budget. There just is no doubt about it. These capital expenditures pioneering element, and you're not going to immediately see that ridership. But thinking about the long term, thinking about the pollution solution of an inversion, and then thirdly, the growth. It's just, I think it's something we need to do, but I take the comment well, and I think we need to be very aware of ridership.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that we accept the 2018 budget for UTA.
Is there a second? Second. All right, I will call the motion. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? Are there any reasons why anyone should recuse themselves? I suppose I should ask that as well. And seeing none, the motion carries with one dissent from Trustee Taylor.
Comment?
Sure.
I couldn't get in there before the motion was made, but I wanted to just follow up on the Vice Chair Bell's comment about the pioneering effort. I think that the ridership at this point is low because of, like you said, we're in economically fairly good times. But as we look forward in our long-term vision, we know we're going to have those valleys of recession in the future, and we will need transit. And if we don't make good, strong choices now in those hard times, we're not going to have the strong infrastructure we need. I guess I look at it a little bit like food storage. Now is the time to plan, not when we're in the time of need. And so I just wanted to add my voice that I think that this is a really good budget. It does take in the fact that we are planning, but we're not putting too much into it. So I don't think it's an overkill on that. But I just wanted to say that from the smaller communities like Tooele and up in Box Elder County, we are looking forward to a day that we can have a little bit more bus service to connect us to the front runner and tracks, because we see the need in the future.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you all for your comments on this. I think this is a very fiscally sound budget. I think this budget reflects the strategic ideas that were set out in the board retreat. I think there's been a great job putting it together, and I think it represents our commitment to customers and to communities to provide transit service that meets everybody's needs in a frugal and cost-conscious manner. So thank you to everybody that's been involved in this. Let's now move forward with an update on our bond parameters resolution. Jeff, do you want to say anything about this before we turn it over to Bob?
Bob's fully prepared. We're good to go.
Okay, thank you very much. I do want to point out we have the finance team here. Blake Wade, bond counsel's behind me, who's been intimately involved in this. Has been very busy doing a lot of advance refundings, as has been Brian Baker, who's the financial advisor, and he serves as the financial advisor for the board. You know, obviously works with us very closely, but is actually the advisor for the board. And then Richard Swinson, the deputy treasurer, is also here. So the story has to start with tax reform. There's a provision in the tax reform that's in front of Congress right now that does away with advance refunding opportunities for municipalities. Now, as we were looking at our 2018 bond issue, we've been tracking an advance refunding to go along with that, you know, trying to save issuance cost. Well, the tax reform right now says that advance refunding opportunities end December 31st of this year. So that has an effect on UTA, and I'll talk about that for just a little bit. If you go to the next slide. So as we're looking at the advance refunding plan now under the new tax code, we have to be completed by December 28th, close on that day. So as we got the financial team together and talked about what our opportunities were to do an advance refunding and take advantage of the savings, we decided that really the only option available to us was a direct purchase. Wells Fargo is one of our approved underwriters. We have three. They're the approved underwriter. They do direct purchase type investments. They were involved in the 2014 direct purchase. They didn't get it, but they were very competitive. So we've moved forward with the understanding that we would use Wells Fargo in a direct purchase. Again, we want to close on December 28th. In the parameters resolution, we've asked for a maximum of $130 million. As of last Friday, we were thinking it's closer to $120 million, and that the estimated net present value savings is somewhere between 10 and 11 million right now. We've continued to refine this since we've talked to the Finance Committee and seek ways to get the maximum net present value savings. This is really talking about the direct purchase. It's the first step of two to actually achieve the advance refunding. The direct purchase achieves the refunding. It puts the money into the escrow to retire the 2012 bonds that we're looking at with the advance refunding. Then in February, we would take out this direct purchase with a long-term financing plan. And when we do that, what we'll also look at is there a potential to restructure how our debt service payouts look in the short term. Sign off on the direct purchase is the same designated officers as we've used for the last several debt issues. It's the board chair, the chair of the Finance and Operations Committee, and then either myself or Richard. Oh, and I should, if you'd go back that one slide, I should mention that any savings from the refunding, according to board policy, goes into what I call the early debt retirement fund. Right now, with our current system, we'll have about $98 million in that fund in 2022, and the plan is to take out $98 million of the 2012 issue that's got 5% coupons on it. So that's the current plan and how we intend to use the early debt retirement fund. Any savings from this would go into that fund also. So as we looked at the advance refunding, there are some risks, and we wanted to make sure we brought those up in front of the committee and now the board. One of the risks is that the yield curve changes between now and February when we actually go to market on the long-term debt. If the markets go lower, which is what the current forecast is, it would be positive for us. It would be negative if the long-term rates went up. We're actually seeing the short-term rates go up right now, which is to our advantage in the direct purchase. It makes the cost of the escrow lower because rates are higher. So that's a good thing. So our risk is really long-term rates after we do this transaction. One of the ways we intend to mitigate that is to do the long-term debt early next year. So there's a 60 to 90-day period that we'll have some exposure. One of the other things we're doing to mitigate that is the direct purchase is a 3-year instrument. So if something happens in the next 60 days that the markets are just in turmoil and it's not a good time to go, we've got a 3-year period to actually get into the market and take out this direct purchase. So we think that mitigates us. The other mitigation factor here is we looked at the additional issuance cost. We think it's about $100,000. Because we go ahead and do this direct purchase now, in that 2-month period, we'll save about $453,000 in interest. So that'll help mitigate the effect if the markets go against us in the next 60 days. So the actual bond resolution includes $130 million to refund portions of the 2012 bond issue. The 2007, we actually have one that we don't have to advance refund, we can just refund, we can call it because the 10 years has passed now. So we put that in, it'll just be a current refunding. Current refunding. And then we included also what was in the budget for the 2018 capital plan, the $88.5 million. The parameters are then $218,500,000 total par value. The maximum maturity is 30 years. We're actually capping it at 2045, so it won't be 30 years. We've got a maximum interest rate coupon of 5.5% in there. What we will be doing when we negotiate this is looking for coupons that are lower than that to minimize our actual cash outlay. But it comes, when we do this, what we'll really be interested in is the true interest cost. If we could do the deal right now, we're in the 3.4% range of true interest cost. So we'll look at, is it better to issue more par at a lower interest rate, or do you have a little bit higher interest rate and you have to issue less par? It's a trade-off. And that's part of what you asked the board chair and the chair of the finance committee to be a part of as we have those discussions with our financial advisor. And again, it requires a sign-off by either the board chair and the chair of the finance committee. We've historically included both in those discussions, and then either Richard or I. So from here, the next steps are we'll continue, assuming you approve the resolution, we'll continue our efforts to try to achieve the net present value savings on the refunding before December 28th. Then in January, we'll start to work on the next bond issue, which will take out that direct purchase. We'll work on doing our bond rating agency presentations, get that done in probably late January. And then we're looking at the middle of February to actually hold the bond sale, be a negotiated sale likely. And then we would report results on February 14th and try to close end of February, first part of March. Are there any questions about the ordinance? We try to use judgment and calculate what's to our best advantage. And of course, we use all of our financial expertise behind me and experience to make sure that we've mitigated any risk.
I don't think Bob has a dartboard. I have a question for Bob. How does this, or does it at all affect our bond rating overall?
You know, I don't anticipate that would affect our bond rating. We've told them that we have bond issues coming up in 2018. I would not anticipate any change there. What they'll be looking at, they have several factors they look at. They look at the economy, they look at management, they look at how we perform relative to our budgets. There's no change here from what we've been telling them.
I just love that we have a triple A bond rating, just like the state of Utah.
That's on our senior debt, yes.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. We wouldn't want to mess with that at all. Thank you.
Bob, pardon me, there's a little bit of risk here because the bank they're lending us the money, buying our bonds, right? They're expecting us to refund in February at a lower rate. First of all, the question is, did the prohibition against refunding make it in the final version of tax reform, Blake? It's
Yes,
as
it's
we
still in.
as we expected. Yeah. So this is we're getting right in in the last minute. I suppose if rates really took off, then in February we might not want to refund at that point. Is that correct?
That's correct. You know, we would continue to monitor the situation, and if rates did rise suddenly, I think we've calculated it would have to go up 1.5%. Is that correct? Yeah. So it'd have to go from the current market, it'd have to go up another 1.5% or 150 basis points. Obviously, the closer you get to that, the more we would have discussions about do we go forward or not. Part of what you want to consider is what do you think is going to happen in the long term? Is that a permanent situation or not? Or will they go higher? Do you think that's just an aberration and they'll come back down? So those are the kind of discussions we'll have.
But in an event, I mean, the risk is some world event or some
Correct.
black swan could occur and then rates go up and all of a sudden we don't want to take it down. But I think you've tried to provide for that in the term of the note with Wells Fargo. What is that term?
That's correct. It's a 3-year term. And so that gives us time to handle that kind of event.
So that we're going to have 3 years at our convenience without being forced to, right?
Correct.
We're good for 3 years, so we can then pick the time.
Correct. And we're anticipating there'll be a 60-day call. So for the first 60 days, we wouldn't be able to call or pay off the direct purchase. But anytime after 60 days until maturity, we could pay off the direct purchase.
And nothing in the new tax bill would prevent us from doing that.
We're good.
I was going to say, UTA is not in a dissimilar position than other entities. I mean, our city's doing this same thing. UIA, which is the interlocal agreement with multiple cities on the fiber network. The amount of work that's going into this based on this tax change is unbelievable, but it's beneficial to the organization. So I applaud the efforts on the outside and inside financial people. I think it's setting us up for an opportunity to really benefit by this year end before the tax law changes.
Thank you. I noticed the state treasurer posted something where they just signed off on $120 million advance refunding, and their net present value savings was around $5 million. So there's a lot of organizations scurrying, trying to get this done.
My comment was actually what Trustee Bell asked, Chairman, so it's been answered. Thank you.
At this time, I'll open it up for public comment. Bob, are there any persons that wish to make public comment on it?
I don't have any cards.
All right, is there anyone in the audience that would like to make a comment on it during the public comment period? Seeing none, I will close the public comment period. and ask the board whether there's additional discussion or whether we want to entertain a motion with respect to this parameters issue. Sherry?
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we accept this parameter and pass this bond.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve Resolution 2017-12-02, the bond parameters. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed?
Opposed, and I had a comment, Chairman, if I
Sure.
could give that. Just wanted to mention why I was voting no. I very appreciate the refunding. I think that's a great step. Applaud the agency for doing that and paying close attention to those. We've done the same, as Trustee Acerson said, to refinance debt. So I think that's a great step. This capital project list, I think there's a lot of great projects on it, and I'm talking about the $88 million in new bonding. I'm not necessarily opposed to all these projects, but I just am opposed to doing them through new debt when we are spending so much more on operations. You know, going back to the discussion from a minute ago, my concern is not the amount we're putting into capital for future growth. It's the $98 million in operational expenses when we could be using that money for capital instead of new debt for capital, because we've poured all this money into operations. So, you know, some of these items are repair and replacement. And that's a concern to me too, when our incomes again increase dramatically, but we're not able to fund repair and replacement of signal replacements, curve replacements, interlocking, 4th and Main interlocking. Those are all asset replacements. We should be setting money aside, and as we go along, to have money for these kind of asset repair and replacement, to not need to do it through debt at a time when our operating income has increased from the taxes. So I just have a concern overall with using new debt at this time in the agency's history for this, when our current debt sheet, and I hope you've all looked at this, of the next 22 years, our principal payments increase for 20 of the 22 next years, all the way through 2040. And that doesn't even include all the new projects that are going to come to the agency, all the new expansions and things. And so I see we just have so much debt and are not, and when I see us doing asset repair and replacement with debt, it's a major concern. So that's why I voted no. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments. That motion carries with one negative vote from Trustee Taylor. I think this is incredible that our finance team was able to put together this proposal on such short notice. It's going to ultimately save us some $10 or $11 million. And I am confident that if there was any concern at all among our bond agencies, that our bond rating wouldn't be a AAA. I think we need to take a lot of comfort in the fact that these bond rating agencies recognize how well run this organization really is. So thank you, Bob, Jerry, to the whole finance team for this is awesome. Thank you. And I'll now turn the time over to Trustee Everett to talk about the Citizens Advisory Board situation.
Thank you so much. The Citizen Advisory Board is seeking some final, UTA has formed a Citizens Advisory Board, and they're seeking approval of the final nominations of this Board of Trustees. This came from 2017 legislation to form Citizens Advisory Board. The Service and Customer Relations Committee have reviewed the goals for this board, and they developed a charter for this committee earlier this fall. This board's role will be to provide consumer advice to UTA management. Trustees Christensen and Acerson were selected to serve on the selection committee for this board selection, and today they have forwarded some names of 10 great candidates, and several of them are here today. If they would stand up, we'd like to recognize you. Thank you so much for your willingness to bring us additional information and advise us on some things in your service area. We look forward to hearing your information. And since you were on the committee in helping determine, is there anything you'd like to add about how these people were selected and what you learned?
Well, I know internally, the committee spent a lot of time in taking the recommendations from the different organizations out there, trying to get a very broad sweep of candidates that could serve, that would be representative of the service area that UTA services. And we tried to make sure that it was broadly represented, that we looked at the different demographics and made sure that one area wasn't overrepresented, that there was a balance, and it was all the way from higher income to lower income to gender to nationality. We just tried to make sure that it was very inclusive, and we had wonderful candidates, of whom some of them are here today. So that's what we forwarded on, and hopefully it serves the purpose that it was intended. Thank you.
Yes.
Is there a budgetary issue dealing with this board? I mean, is there a cost to UTA to have this thrust upon us by the legislature?
Go ahead, Derek.
If I may, Trustee Hall Everett, UTA had in place a citizen advisory committee. It was a little different structure, and so we have the resources in our base budget to manage this effort, so there's no big impact.
Thank you. I've had a request that these board members maybe just come up to the podium and introduce themselves, tell where they're from, give us your name so we can get a little better acquainted with you, and what you think you've got yourself into now.
Welcome to UTA.
Hi there. My name's Chana Cummings. I don't have a car, so and I moved from, after 40 years in the Salt Lake Valley, to Ogden about 4 months ago, which has a wonderful bus system. But then everything in Ogden is more compact. But I'm thrilled. When they asked for the volunteers at the senior center, actually 2 of us raised our hands, but the other one decided it was too difficult for her to follow through. But I'm thrilled in the sense that I'm in the Golden Spike room, and that picture outside in the lobby and by the receptionist, my great-great-grandfather's in it because he helped, he was a supervisor of the joining of the rails. So let's call it an eco trip. But thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Fatih Fatah, and I am a district director for our vocational youth tested officer rehabilitation office in Ogden, also known as vocational rehab. So some of you might know. So I also sit in the Ogden Chamber of Commerce with a lot of many agencies and businesses that also we meet together to help with the progress and growth of Ogden in a lot of areas. But I live in Magna and I work up in Ogden. So I'm grateful for UTA because I take the bus, the Max bus at 4:20 in the morning. From the bus to the tracks, and then the tracks to the front runner, and then front runner to another where I work up in Ogden. So every day I see a lot of stuff that go on the bus, and sometimes I step in and take stuff in my own hands because of a lot of times with my I work with individuals with disability, so that's another interest why I'm also interested in being in this citizenship advisory board, that I can also be a voice for a lot of our individuals with disabilities that also utilize a lot of UTA services, and this is also a struggle as well for my role as well in helping individuals in trying to connect and locate transportation for a lot of our individuals with disabilities that need to get to places for their appointments or for services that they need. So I hope that they'll be able to do what we can to help support our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Shauna Brock. I am the volunteer coordinator for Meals on Wheels of Salt Lake County Aging and Adult Services. I have a long history of working with people with disabilities who have struggled with the cost increases, et cetera, of the paratransit services. So that was one thing that drew me. I do not have a car. My partner does not have a car. We rely 100% on UTA to get everywhere from doctor's appointments to work to getting out to see my mother in West Valley on Sundays, which, as you guys should understand, the schedules are nearly impossible. So I'm very involved in what UTA does and what it needs and the impact that UTA has on the community, and that's why I was glad that Aging and Adult Services had asked me to apply to sit on this board. So there you go.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Leroy Padilla, and I just work down the street over here at the Road Home Homeless Shelter. I have taken a bus for years. I just started driving in 2009. However, I don't drive all the time, at least 3 times a week. I bring the bus and the tracks train to work. I live in Magna. In the past, I have made phone calls for concerns that I had, and when I've talked to someone, and this opportunity gives me a voice where I can talk to someone here personally and let them know concerns that I have seen on tracks train, seen on buses, and sometimes just what I feel, why changes were made, and why were they made, which affected a lot of people that are in a position of using the public transportation. And so this gives me an opportunity to voice not only for but a lot of other people, not just myself. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Nisha, thanks for being able to be here. You are part of the selection committee. Is there anything you would like to add?
Yes, I was, and I am just absolutely tickled with the variety and the qualifications of this committee. We worked very hard, and I'm sure you've had that explanation already, to make sure that we took seriously the legislative mandate, but even more, we took seriously our responsibility to have the very best possible advisory board, and truly we have. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your efforts. We appreciate that. That is, I think, everything I have.
Well, thank you. That was great. Bob, are there any public comments that we should be dealing with at this point?
I do not have any filled out cards.
All right, I will then close the public comment period and open up for board comments or motions as your pleasure is.
Yeah, so as a previous member of this, in the previous iteration of this board, I'm very enthused to see how many, regular writers are on this board, and to see what comes out of this group in terms of advice and differences in what the board decides or what the community advisory board recommends. I'm really heartened to see how many members of the disability community out there are involved, as well as advocates, having spent a number of years working in the disability community and the need for consistent public transportation and reliability. That I'm glad those voices are there. And with that, I would like to eventually make the motion to approve said committee. So,
well, let's assume that's the motion that was made. Is there a second? Been moved and seconded. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed or abstentions? That motion carries unanimously. I think this is marvelous. I welcome all of you to this board. I think you're going to give us a voice that needs to be heard. So thank you very much for your agreeing to serve in this capacity. We have a couple of items that need to be discussed in closed session. One is a personnel issue. The other involves some pending litigation. So with that, I would entertain a motion to go into closed session. Is there a second? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Are there any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Let's take a 5-minute break so we can turn off the cameras and ask those that don't need to be in for this session to please exit We are now back into open session. There is nothing to report out publicly with respect to the matters that were discussed. We do have one final item requiring a vote of approval under Utah law. We need to provide notice annually of our anticipated meeting schedule for the coming year, and we've done that in Resolution 2017-12-04. Bob, do we have any public comments with respect to that?
No, we do not.
I will then close the public comment session and turn it over to the board. Note that there are no meetings scheduled in either February or April or July. If meetings are necessary, they can be scheduled at that time, but we're anticipating a need for those. So either comments, discussions, or I would entertain a motion to approve that resolution. Been moved and seconded. All in favor of Resolution 2017-12-04, say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed or abstentions? That motion carries unanimously. The next regular meeting is going to be January 24th at 1:30. I guess the other item is, I guess my term on the board ends after this meeting. And bear with me, I'd like to just make about 2 minutes worth of comments. I have, over the last several years, ridden the bus a lot. I have actually ridden the entire track system and the entire front runner system. And I am incredibly impressed with our operators and the people that come in contact with the public. They are so courteous, kind, thoughtful of other people. I've also spent a lot of time with our executive team as well as some of our business unit people. It is easy to see when you are around these people why UTA is recognized nationally as one of the best transit agencies in the country, both in terms of the way it's run, the way it's financed, everything about it. People come to us and look for that. And we have an incredible board. This board has given countless hours over the past couple of years. We have made significant changes in the way this board operates, in the controls that we have, in the direction that we set for our executive team. And these changes are not cosmetic changes. They're real changes. They're substantive changes. And UTA has been criticized a lot. But interestingly, when I've asked people what it is they're concerned about, it's all something that happened years ago. Things that virtually won't happen again just because of all the controls that are in place. And particularly won't occur again when we have a board that is as involved as you all have been. Everybody has stepped up and taken over. This is a great organization, and I'm going to miss being around everybody here. It's a great thing to see people on this board make decisions not based on personal agendas, but on what they think is best for the public in terms of using tax dollars, in terms of providing services. You all have been great to be around, and I'm going to miss being around. So thank you for everything you're doing, and keep doing it. Oh, sit down. Sit. This is embarrassing, please.
Mr. Chairman, if you'll indulge me for just a minute, I would like to express my appreciation and appreciation of the entire UTA staff for your service on the board, and especially your service these last many months as chairman. So this board, as you all know, is consuming work, and my job is not always the easiest. And what I can say is I feel confident I can face whatever challenge comes toward UTA because of the leadership of this board. And especially, I appreciate Bob McKinley. He was always there to answer the phone when I called, and spent almost every Monday having lunch with me, listening to whatever was happening that week, and then giving calm and wise advice and direction. A lot of the things that Bob contributed were behind the scenes. If we look at our collective bargaining agreement, that was kind of a quiet thing, but it's huge. And Bob gave us a lot of advice and direction as we were going through that. You think about where our internal audit function is right now. Bob provided the leadership to Rihanna and the rest of the organization to get that whole program set up and functioning. behind the scenes and the federal investigation. So Bob took over at a time when we didn't know what direction that was going to take and helped provide the direction and leadership that got us to a very positive outcome. The other thing I would say that I have observed is Bob's effort to make sure every member of the board was included, that every voice was heard, and that we had a very participatory board. And I think we're in a much better place as a board than we were before he took over as chair, and I really appreciate that because that makes the whole agency function better. When we're all rowing in the same direction, everybody's able to be more effective. So I have a couple of mementos for you. One is a nice heavy metal rendition of our Siemens S70 car.
Cool, thank you.
The second item is a very rare collectible that is not being produced anymore. I'm assuming that's what's in that box. Okay. I didn't wrap it.
We'll see what it is.
And so I think there are only 3 of these left in existence, and you now own one.
I can't even get it open to find out what it is.
Yeah, it's really, it's something that 9-year-old boys as well as retiring board chairs would appreciate.
Well, it's nice to know the company you put me in.
Yeah. And while he's working on that, I'm going to just say something from me. I know that when, there you go.
Cool, awesome.
So this is the
awesome.
HO scale front runner Bombardier bi-level coach.
Cool, thank you.
And then lastly, this is for me because when you ski every day, you need to have a couple pairs of socks. So change your socks at least once a week, and there's some new socks for you to use up on the ski hills.
Thank you.
So thanks again. It's really just been a pleasure working with you, and you don't know how much of it you allow me to sleep at night as chairman. So thanks for your service, Bob.
Well, thank you. Well, I spent many years as a Boy Scout, and one of the keys of a Boy Scout is always leave the campsite better when you leave it than when you found it. And the Girl Scouts, yeah, but that wasn't part of my deal. And I'm convinced that this is going to be a better organization because you're getting a better chairman going forward that's going to really meet the needs that we have right now. So at this time, I'd like to call Greg and Rebecca to the stand and swear you in as
Just before
officially
they
the
go,
chair.
though, I want to take a point of personal privilege here. And that has, it has been an honor to serve as your vice chair. I'd like the board to know how concerned he has been about the direction of this organization and each of you as board members and making contributions and in our discussions. I've appreciated his balance and his humor and his concern and his vision for the long term. I don't think you can ask for better qualities that have served this organization. And he's taught me a lot about leadership and how he's entrusted responsibility with other board members and believed in their efforts to handle that. And you'll be greatly missed, Bob.
This is kind of embarrassing, but I would have one final request, and that is, could I have this whole session transcribed and so I can give it to my wife to read?
Don't I need a Bible to be sworn in?
Raise your hand. I, Gregory S. Bell,
I, Greg Bell,
do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution
do solemnly swear that I will obey and support and defend the Constitution
of the United States and the Constitution of this state,
of the United States and the Constitution of this state,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office
and that I will discharge the duties of my office
as chair of the Board of Trustees for the Utah Transit Authority with fidelity.
as chair of the Board of Trustees of the Utah Transit Authority with fidelity.